Okay, if everyone would just open up the file in the tutorial folder called Windsock Start, you can see that I've already modeled this. It's just a simple cylinder. It has no line or no shell. The two ends have been deleted, and then just some simple primitives for the rod and the wires. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply our materials to the object. We're going to be using 3D Studio Max's ink and paint shader for this particular piece. And there's several things that you have to keep in mind when using the ink and paint shader. First of all, you want to make sure that any object that you want an outline around, such as these rings and these lines that hold the sock on and so forth, you want to have an outline on. So with the ink and paint shader, they have a outline around objects that are only separate as objects. So if we're going to animate this later, what we're going to need to do is make sure that each of these objects are linked in a chain or hierarchy. So we're going to link the sock to the ring to the wires to the inner rings, and the inner rings to the main. So that will give us control over the windsock's rotation there. Alright, so let's get on to texturing this now. Now, the materials work in several ways. They have a smoothing group, which is a assigned selection of polygons, which are separated by a group called a smoothing group that can be assigned a number, which will allocate how light is presented across that group. Ink and paint uses that group to identify where the paint stops and the ink line begins. So if I create a different smoothing group for each of these selections like this, it will put a line on each side of those selections where the paint is. Alright. What we're going to do, however, is we're going to assign different material IDs, so we're actually going to have several material slots available in the material editor with different textures on them. So let's go ahead and open the material editor. And this is the old material editor. If you're using Max 2012, you may see the slate editor open up. So if you go to this is the slate editor here. If you go to modes, go to compact material editor. That's the material editor we're going to be working, and that is this one here. So the first thing we're going to do is, right now I have a general material applied to the entire object, or all of the objects therein. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a separate material, and this is going to be applied to the windsock. And this is, we're going to call this orange, or sock orange, for the orange color of our sock. And this is going to be called sock white for the white portion of our sock. So let's go back to sock orange, right? It hasn't changed. So we're going to click on the word standard right here. And here we're going to see our material map browsers, and we're going to pick ink and paint. You'll see the blue sphere here to select ink and paint. So now we have an ink and paint shader. It has not been applied to the object yet. To apply it to the object, we're going to we can do it a couple ways. There's this button here that assigns material to selection. I already have the sock selected, so if I click on that, it'll apply that material. Or I can take the material from the editor here and just drag it onto the image. Now you can see that it is blue, as the paint indicates here. However, we're not going to do this whole thing like this. So for right now, this is the orange color, so let's just make it temporarily a solid. We're probably going to change this to a gradient later on, but for right now, let's just make that orange. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select polygons in a stripe pattern and make those white. So in this case, we're going to select Ink and Paint again, and this we're going to make white. And then we're going to go into our sub-object selection over here, and we're going to select Polygon, and we're going to select every other strip of polygons, like so, and we're going to assign materials to the selection and make those white. So now we have our white and orange striped Windsock. Now our other materials are just going to be variations of gray and white to keep it simple. So let's go ahead and we're going to create another material, and this one we'll call this rod turn, for the cylinder above that turns on the rod. And we're going to make that Ink and Paint, and we'll color that like a greenish gray, like so. And then we're going to select that part of the object and assign that. When I assign these materials, you can see that they change from having just a box here to having these 4 white triangles on the edges. What that means is that this material has been assigned to an object in the scene. That's what those triangles indicate. Alright, when they turn white, by the way, it means that that object is selected in the scene, as you can see. Alright, so now we're going to make another Ink and Paint shader, and we'll call this Rod and Rings. Okay. And this one's going to be also a light color. Let's just do a desaturated blue for this. Make it reasonably light, but not quite white. And then we're going to assign that to the ring, the lower rod, the rod wires, and the sock ring. Okay, so right now I just hit F4, by the way, to get rid of those lines. F4 toggles edge surfaces on and off. And now we can see that all of our colors are appropriate and they're on. Now let's go ahead and take a quick render of this. Now, in order for the Ink and Paint shader to render properly, you need to be in the perspective view. Right now, as you can see up here, I'm in the left viewport. So in the perspective view, I'm just going to hit the letter P on the keyboard, and that's going to turn that viewport into a perspective view. And then I'm going to use the Alt and middle mouse button to rotate around, and let's just hit the teapot icon over here in the upper right hand corner and render that image. Okay, now you can see it's pretty sloppy looking. We have black lines and they're not very anti-alias, but at least we can see the color and kind of get a feel for what it's going to be. And I'll show you how to clean this up in a little bit. Also, you'll note that my background is white. If you open up the file directly, yours will be white as well. However, if you start from scratch, your background will be black. So if you go to Rendering Environment, right here is where you can change your background color to white or blue or gray or whatever you want. So let's just make it that color, like so. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of paint style to our base colors here. So let's go ahead and start with the orange. And for the orange, what we're going to do is go into this box next to the paint color, And we'll click on that, and we're going to add a gradient to that. Now I've already put a simple UVW map on here, so it should go from light at the top to dark on the bottom already. So let's go ahead and click on this little checkered icon here you see above the word gradient, and what this is going to do is it's going to show our gradient in the viewport. Alright, so now we can see how that is affected. Alright, so it looks like we may have an issue here where the dark is on top. So I'm going to just reverse this by making the colors black and white over here swap. Alright, and that'll give us dark on the bottom. Looks like I have an extra polygon here. Let's fix that. Alright. So, now that we have our gradient proper, now let's make our colors back to where they were. So we're going to make the top one a yellowish bright orange. You can see it updating in the viewport. And then we'll make the middle color a little darker, and then we'll have a very rich dark orange on the base. So let's take a render of that. See, and now we have a nice gradient across the bottom here. Alright, so the next step we're going to do the same thing for the white. So we're going to go into the white material, select none, select gradient, and apply that and show that in the viewport as well. It's the same thing. So at the top we're going to make it white, the middle a little lighter gray, and then the base a little darker. Alright, so now we have that. Alright, just gives a little bit of variation in our color there. Now we're going to take our base rod and we're going to apply our material there, and our rings and our wires, and apply those as well. Alright, we can have a gradient assigned to these as well, and all I'm going to do with this is just brighten it up a tad, like so. So we have a little bit of highlight on there. Okay. And same with this, we're going to apply gradient, and we'll keep it the same base colors here, that gray greenish color, like that. Okay. Alright, so now we have this part completed. The next thing we're going to work on is our inclines. We're in 13 minutes into this, okay, so I have 7 more minutes to finish this part. Okay, so to adjust the inclines, there's a couple phases that we could do on the inclines. First of all, we can adjust the color of the inclines, and then we're also going to adjust how the inclines are anti-aliased. There's several different techniques you can use to adjust the supersampling of the inclines, and I'll get to that in a second. But right now let's just work on the color. So if we go to the top level of our material, if you were in the gradient layer, there's this button right here that says go to parent. Just click on that once and that'll bring you to the top level of your material. And you'll see under this rollout here ink controls. Okay, currently all the ink is colored black, and you can see the different types of inks and outlines that we have. We have the outline, which is basically the alpha channel negative space of your object against the background. Then you have your overlap, and what this does is everywhere where there's a fold in your object that overlaps upon another part of the same object, you'll see an ink line there as well. Smoothing groups is what I was explaining in the beginning, where each group is assigned an edge at the end of the paint, and the material ID is where we took the sock orange material here and the sock white material here, and so it's going to put a line between each of those materials, and that's what we want. We won't even be using smoothing groups for this, so I can turn that checkbox off. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have an outline, and for this orange we want to have maybe a deep red with maybe a little bit of yellow as our outline. Okay, now you can see just the outline is like that, so when I render this again, now you can see that this deep red color is here. Also, if you want to give it more of a graphic look, what you can do is check on this variable width, and what this will do is it'll add variations between 2 points and 4 points, so you'll have a different line width as it goes, so it gives it a little bit more of a sketchy look. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this color to the overlap, and I'm going to make the overlap a little bit brighter, so we're going to add some more red to that and move our color up here, because what you want the overlap to do, remember the purpose of the outline is to seal the color from the edge of the scene, and the overlap is the actual detail within it, so you want to have that reflect the actual color more than the stopping of the outline. The outline should be the darkest, or if you're doing self-illumination such as fire and you want that toon look, then you would actually make it lighter, but we'll get to that in another tutorial. Right now our material ID, we want the same thing, so I'm just going to copy the overlap color and the material ID color to be the same. So now you should see we have red lines going in here. The black line, as you can see, is the line that covers the white area there, and the red line is the one we just made, and right now it looks a little too yellow, so what I'm going to do is take that color, redden it up, and darken it almost like a brick red color. Let's see if we like that. Yeah, I like that much better, so we'll stick with that one. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on our white, and for the white we're going to have it's very different ink colors. Again, we're going to select sock white, go to the top layer of our materials. We're going to leave the outline black, but the overlap, this is where we want some really nice highlights, because this material is like parachute material, or satin almost, or silk, polyester. It has a really light sheen to it, so we're going to make that ink line white, and that will give us a nice 3D effect against the dark red line on the insides and white, so it looks like two pieces of material that will be stitched together. Turn off smoothing groups, and again the material ID will make white as well. So now you can see when we render this, it has this nice differentiation between the red line and the outline for this is white. So it almost gives it this 3D kind of double material look to it, which is what I was going for in this project. Okay, so that pretty much does it. We don't really have to do anything else with materials, and I'm right down to the limit, 45 seconds left. So that is all in all how to toon, shade, and color it. Except for the actual quality of the ink lines, maybe I'll go over and edit it for one more minute so I can show this to you. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. What we want to do is underneath the rollout of ink controls, you'll see super sampling, anti-aliasing, and what this does is it gives several different methods for anti-aliasing the ink lines. So right now you can see it's very pixely and scratchy. Okay, so we don't want that. So if I switch here to take off global settings and use local super samplers, there's several kinds you can choose from. We have Haltron adaptive, uniform adaptive, Hammersley, and max 2.5 star. 2.5 star means that it'll take every pixel of your anti-alias and turn it into half a star. You know, it's okay. It's by far the fastest of all the super samplers, but it's still a little jaggedy around the edges here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be using Hammersley, which is the best quality. Since we're doing a pre-rendered piece anyway, Hammersley is the best quality, and but it also takes the longest to render. Okay, and we're going to leave it at default, which is 0.5. But now you can see those ink lines are nice and straight now. There's no jagged edges. All right, you can see the difference between the black and the red here. You can see the difference between Hammersley, which is the red, and the black, which is still 2.5. And so you can see all the frayness on the edges here for the black. Now, if you're going for a sketchy look, you know, like a pencil-y look, then 2.5 star would be great, because you know you have this nice little pencil. But if you're going for a clean Adobe Illustrator look, which is what we want here, we're definitely going to use Hammersley to give us that nice smooth edge. Okay. Alright, so make sure that all of our ink lines are set to Hammersley. Hammersley, by the way, is the mathematician that invented that particular super sampler. That's most of the materials in 3D Studio Max that have those names, such as Hammersley or Bezier or some of the other shaders like Phong, are named after the coders who created those shaders. Alright, so let's switch this up a level, ink, super, and now all of our ink controls and super sample to Hammersley.